It was often said in Blackwood Creek that the forest held no true surprises for those who knew its ways, that every shadow had a name, every rustle a predictable cause, a notion deeply rooted in the collective memory of generations who had carved out a life from this unforgiving wilderness. Blackwood Creek itself was less a town and more a testament to sheer human will, a sparse collection of sturdy, hand-hewn cabins, a single, indispensable general store that served as both post office and gossip hub, and a rudimentary sawmill, all stubbornly clinging to the edge of an immense, ancient forest. The structures, built from the very trees that surrounded them, blended into the landscape, appearing almost as natural extensions of the towering pines and firs. Here, the scent of fresh-cut lumber mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil and decaying leaves, a perpetual fragrance that defined home. Its inhabitants, mostly loggers and trappers, were a hardy folk, their hands calloused, their faces etched with the sun and wind, their eyes accustomed to the distances of the wild. They lived by a rhythm dictated by the seasons, by the waxing and waning of daylight, by the unpredictable temperament of nature. The silence was profound, often broken only by the mournful howl of the wind whipping through the high branches, the distant, rhythmic roar of a chainsaw echoing across the valleys, or the sharp crack of ice on the creek in winter. This was a place where reliance on your own two hands and the steadfastness of your neighbor were not virtues but necessities. They understood the forest not just as a source of livelihood, but as a living entity, vast and indifferent, demanding respect and caution in equal measure. They knew its generosity, offering timber and game, but they never forgot its dangers. The sudden blizzards that could trap a man miles from safety, the treacherous currents of the Blackwood River, the unseen creatures that moved with silent purpose through the undergrowth. Life here was simple, demanding, and governed by the raw, undeniable laws of the wild. Among these rugged individuals lived John Miller, a man who seemed to embody the very quiet strength of the forest itself. He was 48 years old, his frame lean and sinewy, hardened by decades of felling trees and navigating treacherous terrain. His movements were economical, his steps sure, almost soundless on the forest floor, as if he possessed an innate understanding of its delicate balance. His face, tanned and creased, bore the marks of countless dawns and dusks spent under the vast open sky, with faint lines fanning out from his light, observant eyes. Those eyes, often narrowed in a thoughtful squint, held a depth that suggested he saw more than just bark and branches. He perceived the intricate tapestry of life unfolding around him, the subtle shifts in the wind, the almost imperceptible trails left by unseen creatures. John was a man of few words, his conversations usually brief, punctuated by long, comfortable silences. He shared meals and an occasional drink with the other men at the Blackwood Creek Saloon, listening to their boisterous banter and tall tales. Yet he often felt a quiet solitude, preferring the silent, ancient company of the towering trees to the clamor of human voices. He was known throughout the settlement for his steady hand with an axe, his unwavering integrity, and a surprising gentleness, a trait not always openly displayed, nor even entirely understood in their rugged, pragmatic world. It was during one of his routine trapline checks, a journey deeper than usual into the untouched old growth where the trees grew so dense the midday sun struggled to penetrate, that John stumbled upon it. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth, the only sounds the rustle of his own movements and the distant call of a hawk. The forest here felt primeval, its silence heavy with age. There, half hidden beneath a tangle of snow-laden brush, a young wolf lay snared. It was barely more than a year old, its magnificent gray fur, striking even beneath the dirt and matted blood, seemed to shimmer with an almost silver sheen. Its front left leg was horribly mangled, caught in the cruel, unyielding grip of a steel trap.
The animal's eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and primal fury, darted wildly, reflecting an immense, unbridled pain. A thin line of blood trickled from its muzzle, evidence of its desperate attempts to chew through the metal, or perhaps, in its agony, through its own flesh. The snare was clearly illegal, an archaic and brutal device, likely set by some desperate hand chasing a quick pelt, or perhaps by a careless one who disregarded the laws of the land and the unspoken code of the wilderness. The wolf's struggle, fierce and relentless, had only tightened the trap's hold, grinding the metal deeper into bone and sinew. It was exhausted, bleeding profusely, and clearly near death, its labored breaths puffing white clouds into the frigid air. The forest, which had always held a predictable danger, suddenly revealed a new, more profound cruelty, a violation of its own wild justice. John stood frozen, the harsh reality of the situation weighing heavily on him, the raw suffering of the creature before him an undeniable, visceral ache. He could not, in that moment, deny the truth that the forest, for all its grand indifference, was also a place where immense suffering found its cruelest expression, and that the long-held belief that such things were simply the way of the wild, untouched by human interference, was not entirely accurate. His first instinct, honed by years of survival in this unforgiving domain, was a brutal, pragmatic one: to leave it be, to let nature, red in tooth and claw, take its inevitable, cruel course.
A wounded wolf was a dangerous wolf, its pain capable of twisting even the most timid creature into a desperate, lethal adversary. Every grizzled trapper's tale, every cautionary whisper around a flickering campfire echoed this stark truth: interfere with the wild at your peril. Yet, as his gaze locked with hers, a raw, almost primal connection sparked between man and beast. He saw not just the ferocity of a trapped predator, but an immense, agonizing suffering that transcended species, a raw vulnerability that stirred something deep within his own quiet soul. The thought of simply turning his back, of walking away, and leaving this creature to a slow, agonizing demise gnawed at him with an intensity that surprised even himself. It was a betrayal of a silent, personal code, a violation of the quiet empathy that had always set him apart. The wind, sharp and biting, whipped around him, carrying the scent of pine and impending snow, a natural world indifferent to the drama unfolding. But John was not indifferent. Against every warning he'd ever heard, against the ingrained common sense that dictated survival in Blackwood Creek, a decision began to crystallize within him, a silent, weighty choice that would forever alter the trajectory of his solitary path. He would try to save her. It was a reckless, perhaps foolish impulse, born not of logic, but of a profound, inexplicable sense of duty. He slowly unslung his pack, his movements deliberate, his mind already calculating the risks, the steps. The wolf watched him, her body tensed, a low, guttural growl rumbling in her chest, a desperate warning. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, held an intelligence that pierced through John's hardened exterior, a silent plea he couldn't ignore. This wasn't just an animal, it was a life hanging by a thread, a spark of wild spirit flickering on the brink. The process was agonizing, a dance on the razor's edge between compassion and deadly instinct.
John moved with excruciating slowness, each step measured, each breath controlled. He spoke in a low, soothing voice, a continuous stream of murmurs, not words, but sounds meant to calm, to reassure, to bridge the chasm between their species. He recounted old stories, whispered observations about the forest, anything to keep his voice steady and her attention, however wary, focused on him. The wolf's snarls, initially fierce and terrifying, gradually gave way to ragged whimpers of pain, punctuated by sharp, desperate pants. Her exhaustion was palpable, her struggle against the trap having drained her last reserves of strength, leaving her vulnerable. John knelt, careful to stay out of striking range, his hands moving with practiced precision as he assessed the trap, its rusted teeth, and the gruesome damage it had inflicted. The metal had bitten deep, tearing flesh and likely fracturing bone. He knew he couldn't simply pry it open. The sudden release would cause immense pain, potentially triggering a fatal defensive lunge. He needed leverage, a tool. He rummaged in his pack, pulling out a small, sturdy pry bar, usually reserved for stubborn nails or small repairs. The metallic glint caught the wolf's eye, and a fresh wave of growls erupted, her body trembling. "Easy, girl, easy," John murmured, his voice a low rumble, just trying to help. He worked slowly, deliberately, wedging the bar into the mechanism, applying pressure with agonizing patience. The snap of the trap, when it finally gave, was sharp and brutal, echoing through the quiet woods. The wolf cried out, a sound of pure agony, and thrashed violently, but the trap was open. Her leg, however, remained twisted, a grotesque parody of its former grace. Blood pulsed from the wound, staining the pristine snow crimson. John quickly tore strips from an old clean rag he carried, fashioning a makeshift tourniquet above the injury to stem the bleeding.
Then, with painstaking effort and incredible risk, he set about creating a splint. He found 2 sturdy, straight branches, snapped them to size, and used more rags, meticulously wrapping the broken limb, immobilizing it as best he could. The wolf, weakened by blood loss and shock, lay panting, her eyes half closed, occasionally flickering open to watch him, a new, fragile curiosity replacing some of the fear. The sheer weight of her, even a young wolf, was substantial, and the journey back was a grueling test of John's endurance. He carefully lifted her, cradling her injured leg, her limp weight heavy in his arms. Her fur, thick and surprisingly soft, brushed against his cheek. He could feel the warmth of her body, the rapid beat of her heart against his own. He carried her, not to his own cabin, where curious eyes and wagging tongues would quickly uncover his secret, but to a secluded, abandoned trapper's cabin he sometimes used during deep woods expeditions. It was a forgotten place, tucked away in a hollow, overgrown with moss and ivy, a sanctuary from prying eyes known only to him. For weeks, the dilapidated cabin became their refuge, a silent testament to an unlikely pact. John nursed her with a devotion that bordered on obsession, his logger's duties taking a back seat to the fragile life he now held in his hands. Each day began before dawn, a trek through the snow to check on her. He brought her small game, rabbits, squirrels, caught in his own traps, carefully skinned and prepared. He changed her dressings, a delicate and dangerous task that required immense patience and a deep understanding of animal pain. Her snarls and snaps gradually lessened, replaced by a wary acceptance, then a tentative trust. He spoke to her constantly, his voice a soothing balm in the quiet cabin, filling the space with his presence, his unwavering intent. He offered her water from a clean stream, holding the bowl patiently until she drank. The crescent-shaped scar that began to form above her left eye, a faint, almost silvery mark, gave him the idea for her name, Luna. It suited her, reflecting the wild, ethereal beauty of the moon. As Luna healed, a fragile, unspoken bond began to form between them, woven from shared vulnerability and quiet perseverance. She remained, undeniably, a creature of the wild, her instincts sharp, her senses constantly alert. The scent of a distant deer, the rustle of leaves, the faintest shift in the wind, each registered with an intensity John could only imagine. But she no longer feared him. The initial terror, the primal aggression, had slowly receded, replaced by a watchful curiosity. She would lie near the cabin, her head resting on her paws, her amber eyes following his every move as he chopped firewood, mended traps, or simply sat by the fire whittling a piece of wood.
Occasionally, she would follow him on his shorter excursions into the immediate woods, a silent, gray shadow moving through the trees, always maintaining a respectful distance, yet always present. She never fully entered his domestic world, never crossed the threshold of the cabin as a pet might, but she never truly left his side either. It was a companionship built on mutual respect, a silent understanding that transcended language. John, acutely aware of the deep-seated fear and animosity towards wolves that permeated Blackwood Creek, kept her existence a closely guarded secret. He knew the stories, the legends, the ingrained prejudices that painted wolves as nothing but ruthless predators, threats to livestock, and, worse, to children. To reveal Luna would be to invite panic, suspicion, and, ultimately, her demise. He was her protector, her silent guardian against a world that would not understand, would not accept the profound connection they shared. Months passed in this clandestine harmony. The seasons turned with their relentless, predictable rhythm.
The biting cold of winter gave way to the gentle thaw of spring, the vibrant greens of summer, and the fiery hues of autumn. Luna, fully recovered, was now a magnificent animal, sleek and powerful, her movements fluid and graceful, a testament to her resilience and John's unwavering care. Her injured leg, though bearing a faint scar, showed no lingering weakness, a testament to John's makeshift splint and the forest's own healing power. She roamed the vast ancient forest, disappearing for days, sometimes weeks at a time, answering the primal call of the wild, hunting, exploring, living as her ancestors had for millennia. Yet she always returned, a silent gray presence materializing on the periphery of John's life, a watchful shadow at the edge of his clearing, a low, soft whine, a rare greeting. The town of Blackwood Creek, meanwhile, continued its slow, steady existence, its inhabitants oblivious to the silent gray guardian that now watched over its edge, a protector born of an act of forbidden compassion. Life seemed to settle into a peaceful, if profoundly unusual, rhythm for John and his wild companion, a secret shared only by the whispering pines and the vast, indifferent sky. But the peace was a fragile one, a mere quiet before the storm. Then, a winter unlike any in living memory descended upon Blackwood Creek, a brutal, relentless onslaught that seemed to mock the very idea of human resilience. Snow began to fall in late October and simply refused to cease, burying roads and trails under meters of white, transforming the familiar landscape into an alien, monochrome world. The drifts were so high they swallowed cabins up to their eaves, making travel a perilous, often impossible endeavor. Temperatures plummeted to bone-chilling lows, the kind that froze breath in an instant and turned exposed skin numb in minutes. The forest, usually teeming with the subtle sounds of life, grew eerily silent. The birds having migrated or fallen prey to the bitter cold, the smaller animals burrowed deep, waiting out the endless freeze. The once bustling logging operations ground to a halt, the sawmills silenced, their steam engines frozen solid. Supplies, brought in by the last desperate train before the tracks became impassable, dwindled with alarming speed. The general store, usually a hub of activity, now displayed shelves that grew emptier by the day, a stark visual representation of their isolation. Hunting, once a reliable source of food, became perilous, almost impossible. The deep snow made tracking game a monumental task, and the animals themselves, driven deeper into hiding by the relentless cold, were scarce. The ever-present threat of starvation, a primal fear that lurked just beneath the surface of frontier life, loomed large, a cold, hungry shadow stretching over every household. With game driven deeper into hiding and livestock becoming increasingly vulnerable, the townsfolk grew increasingly wary, their fear a palpable, suffocating blanket that slowly began to morph into anger. Whispers turned to outright accusations as rumors of bold wolf packs, desperate and hungry, preying on livestock, began to spread like wildfire through the isolated community. Chickens vanished, a calf was found mauled, and the tracks, large and unmistakable in the fresh snow, confirmed their worst fears. The wolves, they believed, were closing in, driven by the same hunger that now gnawed at the bellies of the people of Blackwood Creek. The unspoken pact between man and nature, always a tense truce, seemed to be breaking. The crisis struck swiftly and brutally, a cold, sharp blade to the heart of the community. A group of children, restless and bored by weeks of confinement and spurred by the dwindling firewood supply, had ventured too far into the blizzard-swept woods, searching for fallen branches.
Among them was young Thomas, the mayor's spirited 12-year-old son, a boy with an adventurous spirit and a penchant for exploring the forbidden corners of the forest. They were only supposed to be gone for an hour, a quick foray to gather kindling from the fringes of the clearing. But the storm, a whiteout that descended with terrifying speed, intensified without warning, disorienting them completely. The familiar landmarks vanished, swallowed by a swirling vortex of snow and wind. Their shouts were ripped away by the gale, their small footprints quickly erased. They vanished without a trace, swallowed by the insatiable maw of the winter wilderness. Panic, cold and visceral, gripped Blackwood Creek. Search parties were immediately organized, men bundling themselves in every available layer, their faces grim. But the blizzard was relentless, a blinding, howling fury that rendered visibility almost zero. The treacherous terrain, now a treacherous maze of snowdrifts and hidden ravines, made every step a gamble. Hour after agonizing hour, the searchers battled the elements, their voices hoarse from shouting, their bodies aching from the cold, their hopes dwindling with every futile sweep of the snow-covered landscape. They returned, one by one, exhausted, frostbitten, and empty-handed, their faces etched with despair. The unforgiving wilderness, it seemed, was ready to claim its innocent victims, a harsh reminder of humanity's insignificance in the face of nature's raw power. The mayor, Arthur Thompson, a man usually stoic and resolute, was a broken figure. His face ashen, his eyes hollow with a grief that threatened to consume him. His son, Thomas, was out there, somewhere, lost to the indifferent white. John, though a man of quiet solitude, was tormented by the children's plight. He had heard the frantic shouts, seen the despair in the eyes of the returning searchers.
He knew the forest better than any man in Blackwood Creek, knew its secrets, its hidden paths, its treacherous deceptions. He had joined the initial search, pushing further than most, his heart heavy with a growing sense of dread. But even his unparalleled knowledge of the woods was no match for the blizzard's blinding fury. As the last weary search party returned, admitting defeat, a crushing wave of helplessness washed over the town. Yet John refused to give up. He stood by the window of his cabin, staring out into the swirling white, a silent vow forming in his mind. He would go out again, alone, one last time. He began to prepare, checking his gear, sharpening his axe, packing emergency rations. The wind howled outside, a mournful dirge, but John felt an urgent, almost spiritual pull towards the storm, a conviction that he had to try. As he prepared to venture out into the maelstrom, pulling on his heavy fur-lined coat, a shadow detached itself from the swirling snow just beyond his cabin's perimeter. It was Luna. Her eyes, usually watchful and reserved, now held an urgent, knowing glint, a spark of intelligence that transcended mere animal instinct. She nudged him gently, her cold nose brushing against his gloved hand, then turned, a silent command in her posture. She didn't lead him towards the familiar, well-trodden search paths, the ones the other men had scoured for hours. Instead, she moved with an almost ethereal grace, leading him away from the town, deeper into a rarely traveled, forgotten part of the forest, a section known for its dense undergrowth and treacherous, unmarked ravines. John, with a leap of faith he couldn't explain, a trust born of their shared secret and the profound bond they had forged, followed. He knew this was an act of sheer madness by any rational measure, but in his heart,
He knew he had no other choice. Luna led him not to the children directly, but to a hidden, ancient cave system, its entrance almost completely obscured by the relentless snowfall and a thick tangle of fallen trees. A natural fortress against the elements, a place no human search party would ever think to look. The air around the entrance was noticeably warmer, a faint breath of stale air escaping from within. Inside the cave, a profound silence reigned, broken only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of several small bodies. John found the children, huddled together for warmth, weak from cold and hunger, but miraculously alive. Their faces were pale, their lips chapped, but their eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and relief, were fixed on him. Among them, Thomas, the mayor's son, looked up, his voice a raspy whisper. They spoke in fragmented, overlapping sentences of a big, gray dog that had appeared out of the blizzard, a silent, watchful presence. It had guided them to this shelter, nudging them towards the hidden entrance. They spoke of how it had somehow provided small, fresh kills for them to eat, a rabbit, a grouse, left at the cave's mouth, sustaining them through the darkest hours. It had kept them warm, not by physical contact, but by simply being present, its wild warmth radiating through the small enclosed space, a constant, comforting sentinel against the encroaching cold and terror. As John listened, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and disbelief, Luna emerged from a deeper part of the cave, her eyes meeting his with an undeniable intelligence, a quiet triumph. The menace they feared, the symbol of their deepest anxieties, had been their silent guardian, their unexpected savior. When the search party, desperate and almost ready to abandon hope, finally stumbled upon John and the children, guided by John's shouted calls and Luna's sharp, distinct howls that cut through the thinning blizzard, the story, fragmented and unbelievable at first, slowly coalesced.
The children, still weak but safe, recounted their ordeal, their voices gaining strength with each word. They spoke of the big, gray dog, of its silent guidance, its uncanny provision of food, its constant, comforting presence. The adults, initially disbelieving, their minds struggling to reconcile the children's fantastical tale with their ingrained fears, watched Luna, who stood calmly beside John, her gaze steady, almost regal. The wolf, not as a predator, but as a protector, a benevolent force of the wild, had saved their future. The revelation sent shockwaves through Blackwood Creek, reverberating through every cabin, every heart. Disbelief warred fiercely with an overwhelming, profound gratitude. John's closely guarded secret was out, but he was not condemned. Instead, he was hailed as a quiet hero, his stoic nature now understood as a deep wisdom. Luna, the once feared phantom of the woods, became a legend, a living symbol of the wilderness's unexpected benevolence, a stark contradiction to every cautionary tale. The incident forced the entire town to reevaluate its relationship with the wilderness, with the very creatures they had always seen as antagonists. It fostered a new, grudging respect, then a profound understanding for nature and its complex, often misunderstood inhabitants. The rigid lines between good and evil in the wild, once so clearly drawn in the minds of the townsfolk, blurred irrevocably, replaced by a nuanced understanding that compassion, even between species, could lead to the most extraordinary, miraculous salvation. Blackwood Creek was irrevocably changed. Its people bound not just by shared hardship and the isolation of their remote existence, but by an incredible, humbling miracle that defied all logic and expectation. The fear had not vanished entirely, but it had been tempered by wonder, by a new appreciation for the intricate web of life, and by the undeniable proof that even the most untamed heart could hold unexpected grace. The quiet woodsman and his wild companion had, in the face of utter despair, shown them a new way to see the world, a new way to live within it.